Welcome to Conversations with Family Business. My name is Peter Roper. I'm known as the Family Businessman. And this is a short weekly reflection about family businesses under pressure. Each week I take one particular aspect, look at it and reflect on it, and perhaps give you some thoughts and ideas based on the experience I've had over the last 30 years with running and operating family businesses. So if you're a family business or serve family businesses, these conversations might seem familiar to you. So let's begin. Harder conversations are something in family businesses that we have all the time. Harder conversations. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, we have business conversations day in, day out. We've had 6 family businesses of our own, I should share. 3 successes, 3 failures. You know what I've learned more from. And certainly with the family business that we now operate, plus my own personal family business, we have conversations regularly because we have to. That's family business. That's how we work. And we have them inside of working hours and outside of working hours. That's how family businesses work. But here's the thing. Some of those conversations are kind of awkward. They're the kind of conversations we have that we don't generally want to have. They're the kind of conversations that probably cause a bit of conflict. So what I want to do is talk about those conversations. And if you see me looking around occasionally, it's because I've made some notes. And I want to make sure I remember that to get as much across to you as I possibly can. So forgive me if I look across occasionally. Family conversations in business are so challenging sometimes. And so you ask yourself the question, well, why? Well, the reason why we need to think about this is because waiting is rarely neutral. Waiting is rarely neutral. Invariably, if we wait with most times, life gets worse. Silence compounds, in fact, whatever the challenge or circumstances are. And so therefore, what I would suggest to you is that in most cases, what we need is clarity before reaction. In other words, we have to be clear what it is we're going to be discussing before we get into it. Because if we just, how do I put it politely, mouth off, just blah, 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 like this, that's invariably where we get in the most trouble. Or is that just me? We do need to think about things. So there are conversations in business that we need to have. If we're going to have them, what's the problem? We just have a conversation, don't we? Just like anything else. Well, sometimes they're not. And the reason why that's the case is because we're protective. That's what it boils down to. One of the reasons is we're protective. What does that mean? Well, I can't turn off being a dad. We have a son and 2 daughters, and I can't turn off being a dad, just as my wife Annie can't turn off being a mom at the end of the day. And guess what? They can't turn off being a son or a daughter, or both daughters. They can't turn that off. And in fact, the beauty of a family business is that we don't turn it off. We are professional, but we are family at the end of the day, and we employ people as well, and they're our extended family. And what I want to discuss with you actually is exactly the same thought process for that extended family, because as I'm sure you know, especially if you have your own family business, you treat your employees as a member of the extended family. And because you do, these conversations can be tough. They certainly can be tough as a father talking to a son or a daughter. So because we do that, we avoid the conversation because in a perverse way, we're feeling protective to them. We want to look after them because after all, that's what we do. We're parents. We can't turn that off. And because we turn it off, we let it go. So there are conversations. I know over the last few months, there have been conversations I should have had. I should have put my hand up and gone, do you know what? That ain't right. That's not good enough. We need to do better. And by inference, it's you need to do better. And by the way, of course, I need to do better too, don't I? But that's the thing, isn't it? That's the thing. because we're protective, we don't want to upset them. We don't want to upset the apple cart. And because we don't want to upset the apple cart, guess what? We don't have that conversation. And in comes the phrase again that waiting is rarely neutral. Waiting is rarely neutral. Whatever it is probably going to get tougher. It's probably going to get worse. It's probably going to be more painful. But you know what? We put it off because we don't want the pain at the time. And because we don't want the pain at the time, guess what? We don't do it. And then it goes on, it goes on, it goes on. Until it becomes really painful. And then we do it. And then quite often the person concerned says, well, why the hell didn't you say about this earlier? And they're as miffed with you for not opening your mouth as it was for the actual problem itself, which, invariably, and, my history, you can check out my history. Certainly, I had very much my downtimes 20 years ago. And I tried to protect the family by not telling them that the fact was that we were struggling badly, very badly. And the biggest lesson I learned was waiting's not neutral. And what I should have done was open my mouth earlier, because collectively we are, as a family, way stronger. Even recently, there have been times when we should have said something on either side, and we haven't done because we're being protective. My wife and I, we're not getting any younger. Kids are trying to be protective of us because we're getting older. Have you ever heard that one before, maybe? And they've wanted to say things and haven't done. And then we've said, don't be daft, let's talk about this. So my point to you is this: waiting is rarely neutral, and silence compounds. Silence compounds the challenge. You see, delay compounds pressure. Delay compounds pressure. So the longer you delaying something, more of a challenge, whatever it is, becomes more pressured. But it ain't just that, is it? It's not just that. What it also is that your demeanour is changing. Their demeanour is changing. Depends on whose side of the fence it is that's got the challenge. And all of a sudden, things don't quite work in the way that they should be doing. And they're not, because you're feeling more pressured. And you know what it's like. The more you feel pressured, the more you start to tighten up with things. Just look at any athlete, for instance. You see them, the golfers call it the yips. Athletes call it, they tightened up, and because they tightened up, they couldn't run as fast or whatever it is. Well, it's the same with a family business, we tighten up, and it comes out in different ways. All of a sudden, somebody mouths off about something that normally they wouldn't even think about, because they're wound up, and they're wound up inside because actually there's something else. There is something else going on. So delaying compounds the pressure. Which brings me on to the third one, which is, let's just say you've gotten to a point where that's it. We need to have that conversation. We've made our mind up. And you might have said something like, look, can we sit down for 10 minutes? Can I see you later on? How about we have a proper conversation at 4 o'clock? Or tell you what, let's have a chat at the end of the day. Or, well, if you can't make it, let's make it tomorrow. Oh, you can't make it tomorrow? Oh, let's make it the following day because you put it off. But eventually you say, we need to have a conversation. Let's sit down, 4 o'clock. When's the toughest part of this conversation? It's always just before. Always just before. The build-up gets worse and worse and worse. There is something really, really quite tough. The stomach's churning, you're acting probably a little out of character. And you're getting to a point where just before that conversation is the hardest bit. It is always the hardest bit. And that's why it's important to have clarity before reaction. You need to have clarity before reaction. In other words, you need to think about it. You need to reflect on it. And that's what these recordings are about reflection. You need to decide on what needs to happen, and then you have to take action, because the first three are rubbish if you don't actually take action. But if you take action before you've done the first three, you're quite likely to shoot yourself in the foot. So bear in mind that once you've started the conversation, it is probably, hopefully, going to get better. Maybe the situation might not be great, but what I can tell you is that the toughest part of actually doing something, the actual physical method of doing something. There you go, look, I'm breathing out. And I'm breathing out because I've actually gone on to the next bit, which is, once you have that conversation, you can then get somewhere. The compounding silence finishes, it's gone. So then it's all about getting clarity before action, whatever the problem is. So what I want to do is just perhaps based on this, reflect on questions for you to think about. The first one is, what conversation are you postponing right now? What conversation are you postponing right now? Because if you're watching this, you probably are. You might not think of it right now. You might be driving along at a later date. You might be walking along or something. Something will make you think about it. And you'll know in your heart of hearts you've been putting something off. Again, or is that just me? I find in my experience when I talk with family businesses, perhaps such as your own, or if you serve a family business, that there's a tough conversation kicking around. And if you're not careful, you kick it down, the can down the road. Let's face it, that's what politicians do their whole life. Oops, I shouldn't have said that, should I? But it's true, isn't it? We kick the can down the road. But right now, I suspect you are probably thinking about a conversation and that you've postponed it and you keep postponing it. And the thing is, waiting is rarely neutral and silence is compounding. So, what is it you're going to do about that? Well, let's think about something else. What are we hoping time will fix? What are we hoping time will fix? See, that's a really good thought. And it's something somebody said to me once, a long time ago, and I was a lot younger, to be fair. And sometimes when you get older, you look back and you realise things. And somebody said that, a version of that to me one day, and I didn't really get it, whereas now I do. And that is, especially if you're a parent, or in my case, a grandparent, you see somebody making a mistake and you know it's a mistake. And you know you need to let them make that mistake because it's the only way they're going to get it. It's the only way they're going to learn. And sometimes you hope that by them going through that process themselves, they'll fix it. The challenge happens is when they do it again and again and again. Then you know it's not working. And you put off that conversation, and waiting then is rarely neutral. So there's a balance, which is, well, are you hoping that time will fix it? Or actually, you're just putting it off, as opposed to nipping it in the bud. It's a thought, isn't it? The last one is, what might be happening right now because you haven't had the conversation? What could be happening right now because you haven't had that conversation? Tough one, that, isn't it? It's a tough one. Even though I'm doing these right now, a conversation has just gone through my mind and I'm thinking, So, for you, those three questions I think are really important. Waiting is rarely neutral. Silence compounds. And you need clarity before you take action. So if you're going to do that, put some sort of structure in place and think, reflect, decide, and then act. It's that order. By the way, I'd love to say I'd invented that. It's very well known, or a version of it. All right. There are various phrases that are accounting with that, but you know what, that will work. You need to think about it, reflect on it. This is part of the reflection process. Decide what you're going to do and take action. But please remember that not taking action is taking action. Think about that. If you decide not to take action, you've taken action. It took me a few years to get my head around that when I was younger. And then one day it sort of bit me in the bum, and then I realised what it really meant. So that's it. I hope this has been useful for you. The whole idea of Conversations with Family Business is a time to think and reflect. And not always to think of the struggles of family business, but also to look on the positive sides of family business. But today, this is one of the areas that I'm asked over and over again. I hope it's been useful. I hope it resonates with you, and I hope you've taken this little bit of time out to think about it and you use it to good effect. If you want to know more about what we do and how we do it, familybusinesspractice.com or peterroper.com. There are all sorts of useful bits and bobs there. But for now, my name's Peter Roper. Thanks very much indeed for listening.